This week's episode on the Wellness Empowerment Project is all about Kundalini Yoga. As you know, Trish is a certified Kundalini Yoga instructor, and so she nerds out with Jen about all things Kundalini. Hope you enjoy.
Welcome to the Wellness Empowerment Project. I'm Trish.
And I'm Julie. We are two nurses exploring holistic healing and wellness practices to empower you to be the leader of your own health. Join us as we try out new things, or as we call it, weird shit, and have some fun along the way.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Wellness Empowerment Project. It's just me, Trish, today, and I am talking with Jen. Jen loves sharing the life-changing teachings of Kundalini Yoga in a way that is accessible for everyone. She found Kundalini as a newbie therapist when she was taking on the struggles and trauma of her clients. Within her first Kundalini Yoga class, she was hooked, and she loved how it made her feel light, in alignment, and connected to her intuition. She now shares these teachings of Kundalini Yoga on a podcast with her husband called A Heart-Centered Revolution, as well as holding retreat. Welcome, Jen.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here and have this conversation.
What I loved about reading your bio is that it sounded very similar, or your journey to Kundalini Yoga sounded very similar to mine in the sense of I took a class and I just felt like something completely shifted.
Yeah.
And I just had to dive in and know more. I'd love to hear more of your origin story.
Yeah. So as I said in my bio, I was in my first maybe year or two doing an internship as a marriage and family therapist. If you're not familiar with that career, oftentimes your first internships, they give you the most challenging, not difficult clients. They're lovely people to work with, but there's so many challenges that they're experiencing from financial and traumas and all this hardships. You're just thrust in there in your first year or two of your career to try to help them heal or work through some of the challenges they're going through. It's heavy. It's heavy. And as a newbie therapist, I was saying, you take on a lot of it. Thankfully, over the years, you learn how not to do that. But I was feeling heavy. I was feeling stressed in a way that I hadn't really been before. And a friend invited me to a Kundalini yoga class. It was actually at a regular gym. So I was not suspecting what I was walking into. She invited me because she and I had been studying some Buddhism and mindfulness and things like that. And she said, I think you're going to love it. So I went in, and Kundalini Yoga, if you're not familiar, is much more of a spiritual practice than a physical practice, which is why looking back, it was ironic that, or like out of place at a gym. You start by tuning in with some chants. So you're using your voice and connecting with the other people. Then you do some exercises that are more about moving energy than they are about building muscle. And so you do those exercises, you do a little relaxation, like a guided relaxation, oftentimes with music or a gong playing. And then you do a meditation, but the meditations are very involved. There's no real quieting of the mind. You're chanting and you're trying to look at something or visualize something with your mind. And you've got sometimes a hand position, and sometimes that hand position is moving. So these are very active meditations. But for me, the end result was almost like my body was buzzing, like my soul was buzzing, and this weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I felt like I had found community. I felt like I had found a way to just settle into a sense of joy and well being without kind of minimizing or trying to avoid the difficulties of life. It was almost like expanding above and beyond them. Like it includes them, but just having this expansiveness. And that was just in the first class. So I was hooked immediately.
Oh, yeah, that completely resonates and very similar to my own story and how I felt completely different. And also the fact that you said that meditations are very active. I've always said that. I'm like, they're very active meditation and you're just quieting the mind in a very different way by like over focusing on so many different things, just almost like creating a lack of space for your own thought to run around in.
Exactly. And the things you're focusing on have a very specific intention and vibrations. If you don't, oftentimes the mantras are in another language. So they're in Gurmukhi or in I'm not thinking of the other word, but some language indigenous to India. And so even if you don't know the meaning of the word, like the frequency of the syllables, the theory is or the idea is that it does something for your brain. We often will focus on a mantra called Satnam. It's Satnam. And it's the truth is my name is the translation. And so the idea is this sound, Satnam, helps you align with your own inner truth. And then if you want to bring spirituality into it, that inner truth is really that we are all connected, we're all one, and we're connected to something bigger than us. But you don't have to be spiritual to have this have relevance, because it is about just connecting to that inner truth, the true you, your true soul, your own intuition. So that's just one example. So even if you don't, when you're chanting Satnam, or when a lot of times we recite Satnam mentally, we're not thinking the truth is my name. It's just the sounds have this alignment is the word I'm looking for. But like you said, the quieting of the mind comes after the meditations in Kundalini Yoga. So you'll chant for 3, 7, 11 minutes, 22 if you're really getting into it. And then you tend to take an inhale and sit with that breath held in. And that's when I've had my most profound moments of just silence and being and presence. If you're looking for that silencing of the mind and you want to practice Kundalini Yoga meditations, that's when you're really looking for it, is after the meditation, after everything's over, just sit and absorb the good vibes you've essentially created with your voice and with your mind.
I'm curious if this resonates with you. I know for me personally, especially as someone who had that busy overthinking mind, I felt like there was benefit to be chanting the mantra and having it not be in English. Because
Yes.
I feel like when it's in your own language and you know exactly like what it means, even if when we say what the mantra means, saying it in your own language, sometimes you start to almost analyze it a little bit much, or it doesn't resonate with you because it has an attached cultural meaning to it. So I do feel like there was something about chanting that mantra. It was vibrational. And even knowing that meaning, you were just chanting that. You weren't going deep with, okay, how does this reflect in my life? Or how do I do this? Whereas
Yes.
I believe like the mantra of I am blissful, I am beautiful. Yes, those are great mantras. And yes, they're in English. But if there's a part that isn't resonating with it, you're not going to get that full experience. You're going to be too busy being like, no, that's not it. Or I'm not feeling that right now.
100%. And it's funny that you bring that up. I don't know if I should go on this tangent, but I'm also a therapist. Part of what I do is help people like reframe thoughts. One of the biggest mistakes people make in reframing thoughts is they're trying to come up with an affirmation or a replacement thought that is too far out of their current beliefs. And that's what you're getting at. If you're trying to chant a mantra or design an affirmation to rewrite some unhelpful beliefs, it has to be within the scope of something you believe might be true. If you're like, I'm going to get $100,000 tomorrow, if part of you doesn't think that's going to be true, it's going to create more resistance and more just like dissonance in your own being. And that's unhelpful to any goal you're trying to achieve. I totally agree with you. When the mantras are in English, and there are some really beautiful ones in English, because some people really need that to bring in. Some people are a little bit afraid of using another language. But I find the ones that aren't in English far more effective for me as well. Because I'm also then not analyzing, is it working? Do I feel blissful? Do I feel beautiful? Am I beautiful? What do they mean by beauty? Is that like objective beauty, like other people? You know what? Like I can analyze something
Yeah.
forever.
No, me too. And I'd be like, I'm not really feeling beautiful today. So is this like in general or at this moment?
Exactly. Or like my soul is beautiful, but like I'm aging. So I'm not sure it can take you out of it. I think the beautiful thing with the chants is you can surrender the mind. I'm sorry, the chants that are not in English. You really can surrender the mind and take on the sounds. I think with an ownership that's hard to do when it's in English. You can really, another one that's coming to mind, and for people who are listening, you don't have to know these, but there's one that's like Ekonkar. We chant that a lot. You can really, because of the way the sounds form in your mouth and your body, you're like, ek, you bring in your navel, you get your whole body involved. But if you were thinking about the meaning of that, which is from one thing we're all created, if you're thinking about the meaning and trying to use the English words, you're not really getting your mind, body, and soul into it. That's a really interesting point about the different languages, about how it helps you surrender the mind.
Oh, 100%. Thank you for sharing that, especially from that therapist viewpoint. I'd love to know too, you had that great experience after your first class. What happened there? How did you continue on? How did it impact the rest of your life?
Yeah, I started taking classes regularly and I signed up for that gym just to take these yoga courses and would go with my friends. It was interesting because in the beginning, that high vibe alignment feeling would last a couple hours. And then as I continued my practice and was pretty consistent, I would go like maybe twice a week. Then I would feel that way for a day or two. So the effects started lasting longer as I was aligning my body, strengthening the energy channels in my body, like all the things that Kundalini does. It does some really incredible things. I just kept going and the benefits were lasting longer and longer. But the teacher I had did a really good job of teaching some of the wisdom behind the actual practices themselves. What I mean is, you can go to a Kundalini class and you can chant and do the exercise, relax and meditate, and that can be perfect for you and such a great practice. But there's also books of yogic wisdom and yogic knowledge about how our minds work, about how our bodies work, about what happens at each stage of our life, about how relationships work. There's some really profound, helpful wisdom behind the yoga practices that you do in a class. My teacher would drop those in while we're meditating. She'd talk about different yogic ideas. I started wanting to learn more about those because I had just finished my master's in psychology. I was practicing therapy, which I still do. I love therapy. I'm a huge fan. But as a person, it was only I felt scratching the surface of kind of what I needed as a human being to thrive, right? Therapy is very good at if you're struggling, let's get you out of struggle. It can do that well. We know how to do that in therapy. But as far as thriving, because insurance companies don't pay to help you thrive, then the whole industry isn't really built around thriving. That's what I found with yoga is how do I not just not struggle? Because that I knew what the techniques were and what the theories were and how to get out of struggle. But how do I thrive? How do I make my relationships meaningful and dynamic and work for me? For me, a big deal is being authentic to myself. I used to have a lot of negative self talk and self doubt around things. In therapy, I learned how to argue with that and how to counter with it. It wasn't necessarily affecting my life all that much, but it was affecting my experience. To answer your question, the teacher was giving all these hints of all the behind the practices teachings. I just decided to sign up for teacher training because I was like, I want to know that. That would be such a good complement to all the psychology I've studied, all the Buddhism I've studied, all the Eastern mindfulness practices like Thich Nhat Hanh and all that stuff. I was a really big fan of all of that. That this was a very deep well of just wisdom around being human that is packaged in the Kundalini Yoga package, but most of it is thousands and thousands of years old. Like these teachings predate most of the contemporary religions. Like they're really profound and really ancient. That's what sparked my interest. And then teacher training just was totally changed my life. It's like before teacher training and after teacher training for me.
I think it's like that for a lot of people. I myself feel like I have a whole different life before and after teacher training. And that's one of the things I really enjoyed too about the Kundalini yoga classes is that a lot of them do integrate the knowledge and the philosophy. Especially, I think if you have an analytical mind, which I do have, and it sounds like you do as well. We like hearing the theories and even the science that's behind all of it. It almost helps put things together in a whole
Yeah.
different way.
Yeah, and I've always felt called to be a teacher, healer, whatever you want to call that role. I like to learn and digest information. I think one of my strengths is when I'm talking to someone or when I'm teaching it, I can distill it down into here are just the basic tenets. These are the things you need to know to make it make sense and apply it to your life. Don't bother with the whole, not people should go to teacher training if they want to, but I can distill some stuff down as just a skill of mine to distill it down to here's the actionable items, here's the information you need to know to make it make sense and get yourself to be willing to try it and then experiment. That's one of my favorite things about the Kundalini yoga, at least the place I was trained. I'm learning as I've talked to other people that not everyone was trained with the same philosophy. But I was trained in a very experimental studio where it's like, this is the way it's taught. Experiment and see what works for you. So, head covering is a perfect example. We are taught that if you cover your head while you meditate, it just helps you go deeper in the meditation. You're less distracted. The idea behind that is there's an energy center at the top of your head where you can lose too much energy. But they wouldn't be dogmatic about it and say you have to do it this way. They would say do some meditations with it, do some meditations without it. See how it works for you. And so I really appreciate it. That was really fun for me, was experimenting with the different mantras and the exercises, wearing a head covering, not wearing one, wearing white, not wearing one. From the outside, what can look very honestly cultish, because a lot of people will wear white and cover their head and we're chanting in strange language. Nothing is required. You pick and choose your own adventure. You get to pick and choose what resonates with you, what works for you in that moment. And I really enjoyed that process of learning all the techniques and then being like, wow, cold shower like really does work for me, but I'm just really can't get myself to do it. That just doesn't work. It works for me in terms of it's effective, but it doesn't work for me in terms of I cannot get myself in a cold shower every morning. Sorry to all the yogis behind me, but it's just not happening for me. That was a fun part for me of teacher training, was that all the experimentation you get to do.
Yeah, I think one of my teachers said that Kundalini Yoga was like a big buffet, and you can taste and dabble to whatever aspect of it really like resonates and whatever aspect you enjoy. I will say I love the cold shower thing. I'm a little different on that aspect with you. So I liked how you really touched on the head covering piece as well as it being possibly a little goldfish. When I was doing my teacher training, it was 29 into 2020. That was around the time where all the stuff about Yogi Bhajan started to come out. For anyone who doesn't know, Yogi Bhajan was the teacher who brought the Kundalini Yoga from India over to the West. I think with a lot of other yoga technologies, and not even just yoga, if you look at it, I feel like it's in any sort of religion, you usually end up finding out that the person who was leading it was not aligned with the teaching.
Yeah.
Their behaviors were not aligned with the teaching. As someone who really had a robust practice before this all came out, I'm just curious as how did you deal with that in that time and your relationship with your yoga?
Yeah, it's just was such an interesting thing, and it's changed over the years. I will say though that I was trained in a studio that was not like a Yogi Bhajan, like worshiping type studio. A lot of studios and communities were like that. They put him on a pedestal and everything he said went. My studio was more experiential or experimental. These are the teachings, take what you will and leave what you don't, which is not what Yogi Bhajan taught at all. Like his teachings were much more, this is how it goes, do as I say, which for the time may have been a better fit. But I think I had heard rumors about improper behaviors throughout since I very started. I think one of my first classes, someone raised their hand and was like, what's this that I'm seeing online? I was always skeptical about the kind of worshiping of him. I also am just as a person not particularly prone to thinking someone who, if I value something about them, that they're going to be perfect in all other areas, if that makes sense. I don't know. I wasn't particularly surprised when all the stuff came out, the confirmation in the book and the reckoning that happened in our community. I wasn't surprised by that. I did have to process it because to know details about what happened and have things confirmed is a little bit different than hearing rumors that, oh, this might be true. I did need to process it a little bit, but I didn't feel like I was losing anything because my teachers, my main teacher was taught directly by him, but most of my teachers after teacher training were like second or third or fourth generation teachers. Guru Singh is one of my favorite teachers, and he trained directly under Yogi Bhajan and was very close with him. His teaching style is so distinct. He brings in a lot of other traditions in his teachings. I don't know. It's just still hard for me to answer this question. I guess I'm still processing. I was processing it for a while. And then I was honestly just really pissed at him for doing this stuff, personally, because of the impact on my life. It was so hard to teach and say I teach Kundalini Yoga or I'm into it because people would have this response of, oh, what about Yogi Bhajan? I'm like, but the teachings are still good. I don't want to sacrifice these things that have changed my life and made my life so amazing because he messed up and he's fill in whatever word you want to put there. He's an abuser. He's a perpetrator. He took his power and really abused the people that trusted him, which is abhorrent to me and disgusting. Those people deserve all of the recognition and validation of their experiences. I just was very resentful for a while that he like tainted the name of Kundalini Yoga with his actions. But I think I'm just coming out of that into more of an acceptance place of it is what it is. The way I landed is that if my high school math teacher were taking advantage of other students, I wouldn't write off the math he taught me as this is all wrong because you were a bad person, essentially. These teachings, I'm taking the teachings away from the person who brought them over from India and applying them in my own life. As a community, we've learned that I think what the revelations have done for the community is that I think everyone's lifted this burden of doing things exactly by his teachings, which were very rigid and dogmatic. And there's a little bit more flexibility and freedom and personal intuition being used as a community. And that's really, I think, good to see people step into their version of the teachings rather than adopting someone else's or adopting Yogi Bhajan's very strict way of proceeding with things.
I really appreciate that you went into that. As someone who was in the middle of teacher training when a lot of it came out, I had some of my teachers that were a little more further removed, like you mentioned, but I did have one or two that were there and did work underneath of him. They gave their honest accounts and that they did their own investigation actually before this all came out. They were hearing the rumors. One thing that you touched on that I noticed that I just don't think is talked about enough is that one of the teachings was it was honor the teaching, not the teacher. When I saw this all came out, I did see so much anger, rightfully so, against him and what he did. I also saw a lot of people wanting just to throw away all the Kundalini yoga because of it. I remember sitting back and looking at that and almost think, hold on. A lot of the people that were reacting in that way were never really going by that teaching of focusing on the teaching, not the teacher. They were so focused on him and following him when it all came out, the teaching went with it. And good, better, and different. It was just my observation at that point in time. It really was very interesting just to sit back and see how much this yoga and this technology and the teaching that are supposed to have you learn more about yourself, learn to trust yourself. As you said, develop your own thought nam, your own personal I am, your own truth. But at the same time, it was done in this container that a lot of people were not aligning with their own thought nam. They were aligning with his.
Yeah, and that's where I think when you got in his inner circle, my understanding is that the dynamics of his inner circle were not reflective of the teaching. So, like we're saying, I got teaching second, third hand, where it's all about empowerment, follow your intuition, pick up what you want to and put down what you don't. And my understanding is that in his inner circle, it was more rigid. And I totally agree. I think putting someone if Yogi Bhajan was your Kundalini yoga practice and you elevated him of I'm going to follow this teacher, then there's a lot of grief surrounding these allegations coming out. But if you were connected to the teachings and that was your practice, which is where I feel like I was coming out. This was my personal practice with these teachings, with these books, with these movements, with these sounds. Yogi Bhajan's face was right on the cover, but that's really and look, he shared some amazing teachings. He had some great quotes, some things that have literally shaped and changed my life. I also refuse to let those go because he was an a-hole. I don't think that's fair to me. I didn't do anything wrong. While I respect they're able to grieve any way they want. And if that means setting aside these teachings and going somewhere else for health and wellness or spiritual connection, then so be it. I was too far in. This is a part of my life. These are my playlists. This is how I spend my time. This is what I like to teach. I'm just too deep and it's too ingrained in my life to let, I don't want to say, I don't want to be disrespectful, to let this like small person, which he ended up being a small person, take that away from me. I'm not willing to let that happen.
And I think at the end of the day, too, we now have some organizations like Evolving Kundalini that are really exploring and talking about the origins of Kundalini, because I think a lot of people forgot just because he brought it here does not mean that he is the origin of the yogic practices. It started long before him. He just knew how to market it and business it.
Yeah. And he did a great job. Everything is packaged for modern times. The quotes I think are amazing. I think the teachings are great. I think his behavior is abhorrent. And like for me, I can separate those things. and I can take the teachings and apply them to my life and let him go. The part that bothers me is whenever I say, oh, here's a quote by Yogi Bhajan, I feel like I have to be like, I know. I'm not like saying he's great. I'm just saying he said these words and these words are pretty awesome. I feel like I have to always draw that fine line between I'm not idolizing him. I never did. I certainly am not now. But the teachings and some of the stuff that he shared, particularly the 5 sutras of the Aquarian Age, like I love those sutras. Like those things get me through it every time. They come to mind almost every day. Whenever I teach them, I'm like, and I think he whole cloth made them up out of thin air. They're based on yoga principles, but I think those literally are his words. So I have no way to get around like that he's the one who created them.
Right.
But anyways, that's a small complaint in the like vast sea of complaints against him. I'm not trying to minimize other people's
No, but I
experiences with
think
him or being victims of him. It's just that's my personal experience with this whole thing.
no, not at all. And I appreciate you talking about it because I also think it's very reflective too of how many times in our lives that may have really put something on a pedestal. And it may not have been a religion or a spiritual practice or a person, but it could be your career. It could be your whatever you hold as your personal identity.
Mm.
And then something shifts that very much attains to that external piece and things tend to crumble. And I think if
100%.
we look at it from that perspective, I feel like the time that it came out and it coming out was more of it being very reflective of our relationship with the world.
Mhm. And
And really, hey guys, it's time.
yeah, the
It's time.
irony, the full irony for me is that his behavior and the revelations,
Mhm.
like if you read all of his teachings, actually help us as a community move forward to what he was talking about. Because he did not, he
Yes.
taught not to idolize him. And here we are. No one's idolizing, not no one, but most people are not idolizing him these days.
Yes.
And he taught that this post 2013 world, secrets are not going to be held. Everything's coming out. You have to trust
Mhm.
your intuition. He even taught that things will be more flexible. You don't have to follow the rules as black and white. And now here we are. Everyone's throwing out his rules and making up their own. It's ironic to me that in his downfall, the downfall of his reputation, I still lean on his teachings to help me get through the downfall of his reputation or to make sense of it. It's an interesting relationship to have with him as a teacher, but a teacher that's twice removed, I again want to validate for anyone who grieves an actual relationship with him, that's going to look very different.
Oh, 100%. I remember looking at that too and just thinking that the timeliness of it, it was interesting. We'll say it was very
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
But let's go back to you talked about the 5 sutras of the Aquarian Age,
Uh-huh.
and I've taught them in my class too. So, do you mind sharing them with our audience?
No, I don't. I'm going to just look at some notes to make sure I say them correctly. Because, okay. The 5 sutras of the Aquarian Age, the premise, and I'll do my disclaimer, these were taught by Yogi
Yes.
Bhajan. But I think you'll find that the teachings themselves stand on their own, regardless of the source. The idea is we're going through this transition from the Piscean to the Aquarian Age, where secrets are coming out, like we just talked about. We're learning to be more community based. That's the goal, right? We're not there yet, but all these protests you're seeing, all the upheaval, this is all in this process of transformation to a better world. We're moving towards compassion, working together, using your intuition, wisdom rather than information and power, like that type of thing. These are the sutras that Yogi Bhajan taught would help us get through this transition period, which is by definition going to be very intense. We all individually are going to have nearly every area of our life turn over with major changes. And then societally, we're going to experience that as well. This is just part of the times we're in. I think if that doesn't happen for you, if it hasn't already happened for you in the past 5 years, it's going to happen for you in the next.
I was just going to be like, check.
Yeah, we need to just accept we're in a period of rapid change, like societal level, personal level, everything. These sutras are designed to help us through this time. The teacher who taught them to me said that for every challenge you're facing, go to these sutras and find a sutra that can help you. I've definitely found that to be helpful. The first one is to recognize that the other person is you. In yogic tradition, we are all one collective consciousness, call it. and we're different parts of that collection or collective consciousness interacting with one another. So quite literally, the person you're interacting with is another part of this collective that you're a part of. And so you're connected. That other person is you. And the way I take that is like thinking to myself, if I had lived this other person's life or had their day even, I would be in the same place mentally, emotionally that they are. And so it's just seeing the connection between people. And it's nice to do with people that you love, but it's even more helpful for people that you're struggling with. If it's a boss that you just can't get on the same terms with, and it doesn't mean you have to be passive and take people's nonsense. But it's just recognizing that they're from the same life source that you're from, the same origin story that you're from, regardless of what your origin story is. It could be the Big Bang. We all just come from the same place. It gives other people a little bit of grace. So that's the first one. Recognize that the other person is you. The second one is there is a way through every block. This is when a challenge seems unsurmountable. There is a way through it. It doesn't necessarily mean you can change everything about it, but there is a way through it. Either there's a solution to it, you can literally change the problem, address the problem, or there is a way for you to get through it with grace or with ease or with some joy intact. That doesn't mean you enjoy every moment of a challenge, but just that inner core of joy that in Kundalini Yoga you really learn to tap into. That is there even when you're going through massive challenges. There is a way through every block. The third one is when the time is on you, start and the pressure will be off. This one resonates with a lot of my procrastinators. When you feel that intuition, and not the impulse, but when you feel the intuition, I need to do this is my life purpose. I need to get a new job. This is the relationship for me, or this isn't the relationship for me. Then the key is to just start the first step. We don't want to do things impulsively or all at once or in a rush, particularly huge life choices, say changing careers or changing jobs. But when you start to feel that pull, when you start to feel that intuition that it's time for a change or it's time to do something, then just start. Take the first step. If you want to, I don't know, if you're trying to get healthier, just see what apps are available. Contact your insurance to see what they have for you. Just that first step. If you're thinking about, I don't know, ending a relationship, maybe you call a therapist so you can process, is this really what I want to do? But the point is just as soon as the intuition that a change or something needs to happen, take the first small step and then you'll avoid a lot of pain in life. What people tend to do is they ignore that intuition. Then your life gets more and more out of alignment with your soul's purpose or where you're quote unquote supposed to be. And these problems like the the dissonance in your life grows and grows and grows until it's so painful that you're like, fine, I'll leave. Then there's a pressure of you're in pain. Things have gotten so bad that it's difficult. Another saying that I think relates to this is you can be pushed by pain or pulled by intuition. The choice is yours. This quote is basically saying, let your intuition pull you. If you have intuition about something, take one step and see if there's intuition about the next step rather than digging in and resisting, because then eventually for a lot of situations, over time, the pain will build and then you're making change like under duress, essentially, instead of with the expansiveness of intuition. The fourth one is understand through compassion or you will misunderstand the times. This is recognizing a shift in how we relate to other people. This is recognizing that as we move into the Aquarian Age, we are needing to connect with other people in a different way. We're needing to give people the benefit of the doubt. We're needing to recognize that we're all going through things. We're all the same. We're all on the same journey. Yet some people are going to be behind you in certain paths of the journey that's a terrible analogy, but someone may be 10 steps behind you in emotion regulation. They might have big emotion responses that you don't have. And so understand their compassion is acknowledging, I have more skill at this than this person does, rather than judging them or thinking of them as separate just because they're different or less skilled in an area than you are. So understand through compassion or you will misunderstand the times. The fifth one is vibrate the cosmos and the cosmos shall clear your path. This one's really tapping into the power of our energetic vibration. When people walk in a room, you can feel what vibe they're in. That's even like the most subtle version of this, where if you can meditate or go for a walk or take a Kundalini yoga class or I don't know, put on some music and dance, like all of this stuff works very similarly. And raise your vibration, like get in a, you don't even have to feel good, but just improve your mood, feel connected to yourself, feel grounded. When you put that energy out there, people will respond to you differently. The theory here is that the universe itself will respond to you differently. Those are the 5 sutras, and I love them every day. I swear they come up in my mind every day. I'm just like, okay, there's a way through every block. I can either get through this or I'm going to find a solution. And just telling yourself that, and I'm going back to the second one. If you think there is not a solution, then your mind stops looking for one. It's called confirmation bias. If we don't think there's a way out of this problem, our mind won't be able to find one. Even if a solution comes to our mind, we won't recognize it because of confirmation bias. This is a very studied, known fact of how our brains work. Even just telling yourself there is a way through every block. If it doesn't come to mind, you can say, the answer is going to come to me soon. Just let it go, drop the problem. Then oftentimes the answer will come to you, particularly if you're engaging in practices like going for walks or dancing or doing yoga or meditation that kind of help you connect with that inner wisdom.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm a big fan of those unit sutras. I see how they also are very much intertwined with each other. In a lot of ways, each one does not stand alone. Each one is connected to the other one. It definitely brings a broader perspective to how we approach our lives.
Yeah, I love them. And like I said, because of what he did, I'm not throwing this stuff out. I also couldn't. It just
Yeah.
comes to my mind like every day. It would be impossible for me to extricate myself from these teachings at this point.
Yeah. Take what resonates and leave what doesn't.
Exactly.
You said you're still working as a therapist. Are you still teaching Kundalini Yoga? Do you incorporate your teachings in any coaching or therapy? Or are you just keeping these two worlds very separate?
I'm starting to blend them a little bit. I won't get into the details, but in some of the settings I was working in before, it wasn't particularly the best fit for my clients at the time. I was supervising clinicians before, like I had clinicians that work for me. I would often teach them little things. In therapy right now, the easiest thing that transfers are the breathing practices. Kundalini yoga and yoga in general has incredible breathing practices. What psychology is doing is they're rebranding them like box breath. It is a traditional yogic pranayama. I understand the intention, but I just think it's really, we're not giving credit where credit is due. All these pranayams that people are like, I don't know, they're talking about them on the Jimmy Kimmel show and stuff. Like, this is yoga stuff. This isn't this mental health, like, and I love therapists, but we did not make this stuff up. We took yoga classes and pulled it over. I just think the rebrand is unfair, but that's a soapbox for another day.
Oh, but I think that's important to note because I know it's something very similar. Yeah, it's a lot of people taking things that were yoga practices and coining them as something else. Even my father, he was having some back problems, and apparently he was like, "Oh, my physical therapist gave me these things to do." And apparently it's from a while ago, but he was like showing them to me if he needed some help. I'm looking at it and I'm like, all right, this is cat cow. So this is a yoga posture.
Yeah.
This is bridge pose. They were all different yogas that they were doing to strengthen his lower back and a little bit of his core as well. I think it's very interesting because people like to lump yoga as only a spiritual practice, but at the same note, you have people that lump it as only a physical practice, where really I feel like it's a practice that encompasses everything: physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, like psychological. Then having something that includes all of it, we live in a system that's very siloed, and we have these different silos that have essentially pulled from different aspects of it and are just almost like rebranding it as something else.
Yeah, therapy at this point has more credibility just in general than yoga as far as like this type of stuff goes. And that's truly unfair because these yoga practices are incredible and have been known for thousands of years. These yogis sat in caves and experimented with, when I breathe out of this nostril, what happens? When I breathe out of this nostril, what happens? Now we have left nostril, right nostril breathing that's being studied and how it helps people with heart conditions. It's amazing. But by the time it gets filtered down to being taught to clients, It's just being stripped of all of it credibility. Therapists and mental health and psychology is getting the credit where the credit really is due in these yogic traditions.
No, that's pretty true. I study a lot of the nervous system, and a lot of the nervous system practices are very reflective of yoga. I fell into that because I want to know how this is so effective. Why is it so effective? For me, got really deeper into the nervous system and the glandular system. And it's fine if we're going to call that these things help work with the nervous system, and that's fine. But let's also talk about that work with the nervous system is what was done in the yogic practices.
Yeah.
We're just now finding the theories and the support to show why it's effective.
Yeah, and I think it would only benefit us as a society to recognize that all these things across different traditions or across different practices come from yoga, because it would make yoga feel more accessible to people who feel like it's strange or just not for them. It's really for everybody. There's just a mental block there.
Yes, I think that's a great way to put it, because I think a lot of us, at least when I signed up for teacher training, my first thought was, ooh, I don't have a yoga body. I don't look like a yoga teacher, but really the thought's the opposite. If you have a body, you have a yoga body. Like that.
Mhm.
Everyone should be able to do it. And there's so many different types of yoga and that affect different areas of our own system as well. I think we just have this thought that it's a vinyasa or the handstand. And handstands don't even exist in Kundalini Yoga, which is probably why I also gravitate
Yeah.
towards it.
I know. I've heard in our studio, we had a guest teacher, and I'm sorry, I cannot recall their name, but they were very ill and like in a hospital bed, could not move. Their point was like, if you have breath, you can do yoga, because this pranayama is such a powerful practice. And if you have thought, you can mentally recite your mantras. It truly is choose your own adventure. You choose what works for you. If you have a disability, or if your flexibility or range of motion is limited, like it's so easy to adapt, because in Kundalini Yoga, the physical postures themselves are like the least of it. It's very helpful. If you can do it, it's very helpful and can enhance your practice. But it is in no way like the pillar of the practice, like it is in something like Hatha, where the physical is the pillar and the other is a secondary. It's not secondary, like philosophically, they all feed into each other, but the experientially, the physical is so primary in like a Hatha practice.
Thank you for sharing that differentiation, because I think that a lot of people just say yoga and they think that it's just one thing. My husband was talking to someone, they're like, oh, yoga's very good. And it was a doctor. And he's like, oh, well, what kind? Because he just was learning that I was doing a new kind. And oh, just the regular yoga, the regular one.
No, people are like, I go to yoga. If you go to hot yoga and you go to a Kundalini yoga class, those are two incredibly different experiences.
Oh,
And whatever works for you, but the goal and the experience is incredibly different between a traditional hot yoga class and a Kundalini yoga class.
yeah. But just because you went to a yoga class does not mean you went to a Kundalini yoga class.
Certainly not. You would know, I think.
Yeah, you would know.
It's a little bizarre the first time you roll in.
Yeah, 100%. So Jen, thank you so much. This was such a great conversation, and for diving into Kundalini Yoga, how it affected your life and how it can really impact the lives of others. Can you share with us, if someone wants to, learn more about you and your own work, how could somebody find you?
Yeah, the best place to learn more would be to visit our podcast. It's called Heart Centered Revolution. You can find it anywhere you listen to podcasts. We talk about Kundalini Yoga, but we talk about all sorts of spirituality, and we call it like conscious living, just living a mindful life. It would probably resonate with a lot of your listeners. And then if someone wants to learn more about Kundalini from the comfort of their own home, or if you've taken a few classes and you want to review like the basics, because there are like 5 or 10 practices that show up in every class essentially, then we have a free 5-day class where you can learn like the basic tools in Kundalini. And it's called Kundalini Yoga Essentials, but you can find it at kundaliniessentials.com.
Thanks so much, Jen. And we'll definitely add all that information in the show notes for our listeners.
Thank you so much. I was so happy to be here and to chat about Kundalini Yoga.
Yeah. So nice to have you as well.
Thanks for joining. If you enjoyed this episode, please follow, subscribe, and share with a friend. Want to learn more about a specific topic? Drop us a line on our website and we can explore it deeper with you.